Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Luce, and I'm really glad that you're here. Today, I'm going to present Moving Beyond Festivals, Flags, and Food, Developing Leadership Cultural Intelligence. I am an educational leader, educational consultant, and EDD student at Gonzaga University. I have been a school principal in Ontario and Beijing, China, and I am currently looking for my next adventure. My presentation today will focus on my research with international school leaders and their development of cultural intelligence. What are our learning goals for today? My hope is that you will develop an understanding of cultural intelligence and its elements or capabilities. Learn some strategies and skills that you can use to develop your cultural intelligence based on my participants' insights, and examine how cultural intelligence can be applied in your role as a leader within your organization, especially as we as leaders tackle those challenging issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, what's my story? I say I'm from everywhere. I grew up in Canada, trained as an educator in the US, and began my teaching career there. Returned to Canada, where I became an administrator, first a vice principal and then a principal. I then moved to Beijing, China, as I said, where I was the preschool elementary principal at the Canadian International School of Beijing. As a leader in Ontario, I was very fortunate and I received a great amount of training, coaching, mentoring, and support to develop as a leader. I really felt that prior to moving to China, that my 11 years of experience had prepared me to apply my leadership skills and strategies in any context. But I was wrong. What I quickly discovered was that not all of my skills and experiences could be applied in my new context. I was frustrated. I felt challenged. There seemed to be a lack of understanding and barriers in my communication with stakeholders. During an IB workshop on culture and context, we were doing as a leadership team, a light bulb went off. I began to recognize that the role of culture in leadership. Around this time, I decided to pursue my educational doctorate at Gonzaga. I decided to focus my problem of practice on looking at how international school leaders develop their cultural intelligence to lead in an international school. As part of my work, I conducted a qualitative research study with 8 international school leaders from a variety of countries, contexts, and leadership positions in different countries around the world. Leaders engaged in a reflective process that included reflective journaling, photo voice, and one-on-one interviews. Throughout my study, my participants acted as co-researchers and shared their insights on the following guiding questions. How do you define cultural intelligence? How do you demonstrate cultural intelligence in your work? How does cultural intelligence impact your work as a school leader, both positively and negatively? And what strategies, skills, and behaviors support the development of cultural intelligence? Today, I share their insights as well as my experiences as an international school leader with you. So take a minute. What does the term cultural intelligence mean to you? How would you define it? What are the critical elements that leaders need to be culturally intelligent? Hold this definition as we move forward. See what changes, shifts, or becomes clearer as we move through our time together. Here is a list of definitions that I presented to my participants in their reflective journaling exercise. I asked them to examine a variety of definitions gathered through Solomon and Stein's research study that looked at all of the definitions of cultural intelligence in research. You can see that there's many definitions of cultural intelligence. In general, These are based on individuals' need to adapt to new cultural contexts. This requires awareness, flexibility, and a specific set of skills. So take a minute and go back to your initial definition. Based on what you just saw, what might you add or change? Is there anything in your definition missing? Is there something you would like to remove? Have you shifted or changed your thinking, or have things become clearer as those definitions were presented? So what did my participants say? Participants in my study felt that cultural intelligence should also include in the definition deep emotional connections with others. As an international school leader, you're often leaving your country of origin and moving into a new context. That means that you're leaving your family behind, often except your immediate family. And in my case, I went alone. So, in order to survive, to be successful, and feel a part of something, it does mean that you often do develop deep emotional connections with others in your new context. They also felt that cultural intelligence should include curiosity, open-mindedness, and an eagerness to learn about others. Most of the individuals in my study are risk takers. In order to pack your things and move to a different context and try in a different country, that does involve a certain level of curiosity, open-mindedness, and risk-taking. They felt that cultural intelligence required an understanding of your own culture, a deep rootedness in your own culture, so that you had the ability to understand the new culture in which you were living and working, and that you needed the ability to look at your own biases and stereotypes, which often came from your own culture. They also felt cultural intelligence was enriched with diverse experiences and backgrounds. Many of them were from multicultural families. Some of them had partners from different cultures, and some of them were raising third culture kids. Cultural intelligence requires awareness, adaptability, and tuning into the norms of cultures, and it was developed through assimilation, immersion, and reflection. David Livermore and Lynn Van Dyne present a four-factor model of cultural intelligence based on Sunong and Lynn Van Dyne's work, which outlines these four capabilities or elements. The first element, CQ drive, is motivation, the motivation to adapt in a cross-cultural setting. And this looks at three sub-factors: intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and self-efficacy. For me, I chose to go internationally because of my experience working in Denmark and Sweden, and my desire to learn more about what other school systems look like, and to see if I could apply the leadership skills and strategies that I had used in a new context. CQ knowledge is information, background knowledge, and experience about specific cultures. And this falls into two categories: cultural general, which would be about Canada, for example, and cultural specific, which would look at the different regions, groups, and cultures within each different province or area of a country. The other two capabilities or elements are CQ strategy and CQ action. CQ strategy is the metacognitive piece, the ability of leaders to observe, analyze, and apply the right strategy to a culturally specific situation. CQ action is the ability to behave in a culturally appropriate manner. It involves both speech acts, verbal, and non-verbal cues. For example, something like sarcasm is not accepted in all cultures, and it's important as a leader or an individual moving into a new context that you have an understanding of how that may be received. That is part of CQ behavior or CQ action. So take a moment to reflect on how cultural intelligence impacts your work. Think of some examples of when cultural intelligence has positively or negatively impacted your leadership? How might the four capabilities, drive, knowledge, strategy, and action, factor into things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, communication, working with a multicultural team, coaching, mentoring, or developing talent within an organization? As leaders in today's organizations, we know the importance of global competence, that we need to work on confronting inequities in our work and appreciating the diversity and approach problem solving from a variety of different perspectives. We also know that we have a growing multicultural workforce. All we have to do is look within our classrooms and in with our staffs to know that our workforce is growing in a multicultural manner. And that's exciting and challenging. As leaders, we need to figure out how to navigate leading a multicultural team and avoid miscommunications and misunderstandings. It's also important to use CQ as an opportunity to develop a strong organizational culture. What are the hidden skills and talents within your organization that you may harness to move things forward in a more positive manner? Participants in my study felt that the acquisition of cultural intelligence in general involved an introspective journey. This was a very personal and reflective journey. No two individuals' experiences were the same. There was a conscious awareness and endless effort. You had to understand from where you were coming, where you were, and where you wanted to go. You had to be really specific about a process, looking at what areas of your cultural intelligence were you lacking and how would you create a plan, an intentional plan, in order to develop those particular areas. When we look at the four capabilities, drive, knowledge, strategy, and action, participants in my study presented some specific areas for growth and improvement and strategies. So let's look at the first area, drive. Participants in my study revealed that CQ drive is developed or fostered through asking questions of curiosity. One of my favorite questions is, help me understand. Could you give me more information about that? So that you are developing a deeper understanding of the cultures and the specific areas within your organization. Showing a genuine respect and appreciation for the culture. Participants in my study felt that by showing respect, they got respect and they were able to assimilate a lot more quickly within the context. Embracing new cultural norms was another driving factor. One of the participants in my study talked a lot about queuing in China and about the freedom of letting go of their cultural norms about lining up in a very linear and orderly fashion to embrace the chaos and the banging and crashing that often exists as you enter into a queuing system within China. Uncovering new passions, whether that's a passion for art and looking at that in a variety of contexts, or food, or learning a new language. Lots of individuals discovered new passions in new contexts. And creating those deep and authentic connections with others. As I said, often leaders or individuals working in international contexts leave their families behind, and it's really important that they create those meaningful and lasting relationships with others. CQ knowledge is developed by researching the culture, and not just the culture, but what's the history of the culture? History often plays a huge role in the present day of the context. Looking at the politics, we all know that at this particular point in the world, things are constantly changing. Areas that might have been considered safe or stable become unstable very, very quickly. And it's important as a leader to research into those so that you understand what you might be going into. Looking at trends, entertainment, language, and business, all of those are things that you can research prior to moving into a context. Actively seeking immersion experiences through travel, living and working abroad, perhaps being part of an exchange as a student or hosting an exchange student within your home. A lot of the participants in my study had those experiences. They were often open to exploring cities and the cultures within those cities, whether it was in their home country or in other countries. Many of them pursued formal educational opportunities, such as a master's or an educational doctorate, like myself, where they took courses specific to deepening their knowledge of other cultures or even languages, or they engaged in professional development opportunities, such as webinars, looking at Twitter chats, readings, taking professional development courses through organizations like the IB or other things like ECIS. All of these things develop their cultural intelligence. They learned about leadership models in different cultures and what they valued. Some cultures, for example, might value a more authoritative way of leading, where others want transformational leadership. And it's important as a leader that you understand what the culture values so that you can tailor your leadership to that particular context. And finally, they looked at developing both formal and informal networks, whether that was through a group of PYP coordinators within the city that you are working, or a principals group that you have on Facebook or through Twitter. All of those were both formal and informal networks. When we look at CQ strategy, it's not very these strategies were very specific to the context, but there are some general things that participants in my study did present as important. They felt that it was extremely important to listen deeply to determine the specific attitudes, emotions about what is said and what is unsaid and what is often implied. And this often builds over time. As an individual within a culture, the more time you are there, the more understanding that you can create based on these subtleties. They felt it was very important to observe behaviors, about the subtleties and nuances of each culture. Again, going back to what we talked about knowledge, looking at those regional specific things as opposed to cultural general things, that is often where strategy comes into play. Asking questions, even if you think you know the answer, just to deepen your understanding and make sure that you are clear. To reflect and unpack your observations, ideas, and understandings, both personally, individually, as well as with your leadership team, with other leaders, people within that particular cultural group. That was important. To recognize your own bias and avoid overgeneralizing. We don't want to get into all Chinese people or all Canadians. That's overgeneralizing. We need to look specifically at individuals, and knowing that often many of the individuals that we are working with in these contexts, including parents and children and teachers, come from a variety of cultures, have worked and lived in a variety of cultures, and may take on characteristics, beliefs, and values of the cultures in which they've worked. You need to apply your new knowledge strategically in the right place at the right time and in the right way. And you can engage, as one participant in my study did, in social action, social justice, or community service. This individual felt that by being part of the community, by working side by side to take on an issue, it allowed them to have a much deeper understanding of the culture and what it valued, and they had a lot that they could take back to the school context and apply. The next area is CQ action. It's really important, leaders felt, to learn the appropriate verbal and nonverbal communication preferences and gestures for the culture, to show again that authentic appreciation for the culture, and that you in turn would then receive appreciation for your culture and yourself. And to immerse yourself into the community and bond with the locals. When you are working and living in an international context, it's really easy to stay in your bubble, to be with the other Canadians or the other Americans, for example. So it's important to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and to really bond with those in the local community. You will enrich your experience there if you do allow yourself to do that. And finally, to develop reciprocal relationships with individuals both in the workplace and in your community. You have a lot to give as an international school leader. You have a lot of perspectives from a lot of different places, and you can share those with others and they can share those with yours, which then just deepens those bonds and relationships moving forward. So, with the challenges of today, there are great opportunities as well to apply cultural intelligence to work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I recently attended a webinar with the Cultural Intelligence Center, and Marcia Ramroop was one of the panelists in the webinar. And she said, and I love this quote, "If diversity is the landscape and inclusion the road, then cultural intelligence is the vehicle leaders must use to get us there." She also presented 4 cornerstones for change. I have taken these 4 cornerstones for change and I have applied them to the work in cultural intelligence based on my participants' insights and also added a 5th cornerstone. The first cornerstone is modeling expected behaviors and practices. As a leader, it is really important that you walk the talk. If you want others to do what you're doing or modeling or what you want within the context, then you actually have to show them what it is you desire. So the first thing you need to do is embed yourself in the culture of the school, as well as the culture of the community. You need to challenge assumptions, yours and those of the individuals in which you're working. You need to stand up to inequities and name them and work to find bridges to decrease them. You need to provide opportunities to learn from and with others. You need to accept and use feedback, even if it's difficult and hard, to fix mistakes or missteps and avoid them moving forward. You can beg forgiveness, but that will only last so long. It's really important that you check in and work on avoiding those missteps and miscues moving forward. You need to ask difficult questions, even when you know the answers are going to be difficult to hear. You need to be vulnerable so that you give others within the context the opportunity to be vulnerable in turn. And you need to listen to understand. You need to really look at whose perspectives are being valued around the table. Who are the dominant voices? Who is the dominant power? And make sure that you are providing opportunities for all those perspectives to be heard. The next cornerstone is fostering understanding. As a leader, you need to communicate your why. You need to work collaboratively with others to establish goals and develop a plan of action. This will in turn establish a foundation of trust. You need to ensure that you're giving stakeholders opportunities to share their stories and perspectives. You need to really take a look, do an audit. Do you have an understanding of the individuals within your context? Do you know your staff? Do you know their stories? Do you know what they bring to the table? Do you understand the parents and their perspectives? That's extremely important in order to creating a community in which everyone feels a sense of belonging. You need to decode different communication styles and methods for all stakeholders. I'm thinking specifically of different cultural groups and how they communicate. Oftentimes it's not very direct. We as Westerners are very direct in our communication. We ask a question and we expect an answer. In my experience in China, that was not the case. Oftentimes communication was very indirect. There was a lot of back channeling, a lot of sideways conversations. Eventually we got to the answer, but it required looking at communication in a different way. You need to ask curious questions to clarify your understandings. You don't want to make assumptions because we know what that means to assume. You need to share your process and rationale for decision making. Everyone will not appreciate the decisions that you make, but if you give them your rationale, it at least helps them understand your why. You need to engage in authentic opportunities within and outside of the school with the community. And you need to spend a lot of time reflecting individually, reflecting with your leadership team, and so that you can avoid challenges moving forward and really see where other people are coming from. The third cornerstone is developing skills and talents. It's important as leaders that you understand the different cultural frameworks that individuals value within your organization. And you can use these different cultural frameworks when working with different teams or different individuals. You can use it also to develop and find those hidden skills and talents. You can differentiate your praise, recognition, and collaboration and feedback for different cultural groups. When working in China, we as a leadership team valued collaboration, and we set structures so that collaboration could occur. Most of our teams had no problem with collaboration. The vice principal, myself, our IB coordinators, and our instructional coaches attended these collaboration times, and we were part of the discussions around the table, pushing thinking, asking questions, and offering insights or examples or even lessons or engagements for students. This, however, didn't work with our Chinese team. When we went to the table, they felt intimidated. They felt that they couldn't share openly their thoughts and feelings about what they were doing. So they often would default to what we wanted to say or what we wanted from them. So what we did in that case was we spoke to our head of Chinese, and we developed a system that allowed them to collaborate in a way that worked for them. So we would meet with our head of Chinese prior to her meeting with the team. She would go there with some tasks. She would meet with the team, take their feedback, and bring it back to us. And we found this collaborative structure worked well for our Chinese staff and allowed them to give their insights and beliefs without being disrespectful to the leadership, which is how they viewed it. It's also really important to understand the desired leadership of the desired leadership style of the culture. Some cultures are more authoritative, others are more transformational, and it's really important that you as a leader know what is desired and expected of you in that particular context. Also, you need to dialogue with other leaders in your organization to deepen your understanding and unpack assumptions. I would also say that you could do that with leaders outside of your context as well. And tailor your leadership development, coaching, and mentoring to the specific cultural context. What do they want? What do they value? What do they need? It's really important for you as a leader to take the time to figure that out. The fourth cornerstone that RAMROOT presents is implementing formal mechanisms. So you can use the lens of cultural intelligence to refine and enhance and review policies within your organization to ensure equity and inclusion. You can realign your mission, your vision, and your values to ensure that all members of your community are represented and that it does truly apply. You can use cultural intelligence to improve bias-free hiring practices. And in my previous context at CISB, we started adding questions specific to an understanding of cultural intelligence and asking individuals what they did in order to develop it, or if they even understood what it was and how it affected their work as teachers within the classroom. You can use cultural intelligence as a lens to onboard new staff. Culture shock is real. And by using cultural intelligence, you can provide opportunities to explore some of that with those individuals that you're onboarding in your new context. You can use cultural intelligence to formally evaluate leaders with EQ 360s or in teacher evaluations. You can use it to review curriculum and assessment to ensure that all perspectives and voices are represented. You can use it to examine discipline practices within a context and have a deep understanding of how each culture values and approaches discipline. And you can use it to improve parent engagement and communication. Are you as a leader ensuring that all perspectives are represented? Who's there within the context? If they're not coming, why not? And how can you get them there? Those are all important things to consider. The last cornerstone that I would add in my own way is creating a climate that fosters belonging, acceptance, and community. As a leader, cultural intelligence can help you to develop a vision for an inclusive community by including all perspectives of stakeholders. You can ensure that you have different voices at the table, and you can ask for feedback in a variety of ways that values each member of the community. It's important to create safe spaces for others to share insights and respectfully disagree and have discourse. And you need to be open as a leader to difficult feedback. So we're going to tie this all together. None of the elements of cultural intelligence exist in isolation. Drive, knowledge, strategy, and action all work together. CQ allows leaders to fluidly move between each of these capabilities or elements. And culturally intelligent leaders use the lens of cultural intelligence to tackle those challenging problems, examine issues of equity and inclusion, and create communities in which all individuals feel that sense of belonging and value. So I've presented a lot of information, a lot of things to chew on, to reflect on, to think, and to analyze. Take a minute, go back to that definition that you held from the beginning of the session. What have you learned? What have you gathered that enhanced your understanding of cultural intelligence? And how can you, as a leader, take this information forward to your context? I have a variety of resources available to individuals. You can check out my website, aboutfaceconsulting.com/resources, and there you will find books, articles, video clips, and webinars that you can access that provide you with more information about cultural intelligence. This is what it looks like at aboutfaceconsulting.com, and this is the resource page that you can access. If you're interested in doing more work individually, you can contact me at aboutfaceconsulting.com, and I will happily work with you. I can also connect with you more informally through Twitter and LinkedIn. I would love to continue the conversation with all of you in those spaces. This is a brief list of the references that I use for this presentation, also some of them that are in my dissertation. When my dissertation is published, I will put it on my website and you can refer to it for more resources as well as more information about my particular study. And I'd like to really take this time to say thank you. It's been a pleasure to present to you all. I thank you for joining me and hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you and have a great day.